Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest, returning guest. We just did a show last week. His name is Dr. Eric Karlstrom, Professor Emeritus at California State University, Stanislaus. We did a show titled The Targeted Individual Program Explained. I had a lot of great responses, a lot of listens on X and YouTube. I don't seem to be being censored on X. YouTube is another matter. But when we were done with that show, we were kind of talking about other things. I know that he was lived through the Vietnam kind of experience, but also he also thought there was things to talk about. And there were some subjects we kind of glanced over on that last conversation last week, which is the Macy conference and kind of everything kind of popping into the current thing, the cognitive warfare. So this title is Macy Conferences, Activated Humans, TIs as Human Experiments, The Great Reset and Cognitive Warfare. So we're going to talk about some of these other very topical modern subjects about controlling people, behavioral psychology, and technology. So Dr. Eric Karlstrom, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you, William. It's great to have a chance to follow up with our discussion last week. We really dug into some important things, and then of course that opens up other Pandora's boxes that also need to be examined. But we talked a little bit. I think I said during the course of the program that I encourage people to watch the documentary The Minds of Men by Aaron and Melissa Dykes and watch it until they understood it. Well, I took my own advice and I put it back on maybe for the fourth time, and there is so much incredibly important information there about what came before in terms of top secret cybernetics and mind control experiments and operations that were going on mostly in the United States and the UK with some of the top scientists in the world, backed by some of the richest people in the world, with governments and militaries all interested in this idea of combining humans and machines. And the idea of cybernetics, is it's a Greek word. It comes from a Greek word which means helmsman or steersman, and the idea is to control and direct the ship. And really the attitude of our leaders has been that this is going to be the new science of government. We're going to control people through merging man and machine. And this, even in 1942 at the first Macy's conference, they had already gone pretty far down this road with the work of people like Warren McCullough, who was into neural nets even in the 1930s and mapping out the neural nets, and Alan Turing, the brilliant computer science guy in England, and then Dr. Norbert Wiener, the brilliant mathematician at MIT, who invented the autocorrelator by which he could not only interpret EEG signals, brainwaves coming off the brains, he started with himself, of subjects, of sending and receiving these signals, and he was able to interpret them with his mathematical knowledge of harmonic analysis for the first time. So these guys were into some very, very profound things. Warren McCullough seems to have been more interested in, and I totally understand this as a scientist, he wanted to know how nature works. He wanted to know how the world works. He wasn't interested in controlling anybody, but he was very, very interested in knowing how the brain worked, because this mechanism that we all have, which a spiritual or Christian person would realize, say, hey, we're made in the image of God, and the crown of God's creation. Well, we have, close to 100 billion neurons, that fire in the brain, and they're connected with other neurons, and there's potential for trillions of different connections. So it has been
almost like its own little mini universe, right? Between
absolutely as many neurons as there are stars in the Milky Way, our galaxy, and yes, and has been the biggest, and still is probably the biggest challenge in terms of complexity for science to crack. And well, what did we have in the 40s and 50s? We had a Manhattan Project for the brain. And this was mostly top secret. They were pulling the scientists in all over the world, and they made a lot of progress in terms of mapping the brain. Even back in the 20s, we talked about Penfield Wilder or Wilder Penfield mapping the homunculus about how, this part of the brain connects with these sensations and this part of the body, etc. And he was doing these experiments where he was doing neurosurgery or psychosurgery on people. A lot of this stuff really gets very unethical very quickly, and then we talked about
those are just like the experiments we know. Like some of the stuff never surfaced too. You can't assume that we know everything that they were doing too.
Well, even just what we know with watching The Minds of Men. I mean, this is a horror show. What these doctors were doing. For instance, again, we'll kind of set the stage so we can go forward. But Dr. Ewan Cameron from Scotland, high 33rd degree Mason, who was a friend and colleague of the head of the Tavistock Institute, Dr. Sir Lord Rawlings Rees, who was really the head of the British Psychological Warfare Division. Okay, so science and military had merged even by World War I, and they were taking the best psychologists to figure out, psychological warfare. And not only how they were not interested in curing shell shock, post-traumatic stress disorder, that I'm talking about the Tavistock Institute in 1917. They were interested in finding out how to fragment a personality so you could induce shell shock, post-traumatic stress disorder in the populace at large. And these guys are real fun
They
guys.
knew it. I just did a show on Estabrooks, Dr. Estabrooks,
Right.
and his very extensive correspondence with J. Edgar Hoover in the 30s, and his books that you can't really find online, that's for sure, but he explains how to make a multiple personality, how to fragment the brain in the 30s. So people need to kind of move the timeline back from 53, the so-called timestamp of MK Ultra and brain warfare, like we were talking about in the pre-show, Alan Dulles, which is mentioned in Minds of Men.
Yeah, Estabrooks was at Colgate College. He was a 33rd degree Mason as well, and he had accomplished through hypnotism the creation of multiple personality, which that person then could be have a number of subalter personalities, and they could be triggered to go back and forth. They would kind of like have amnesia barriers between the different subpersonalities, so you could trigger an individual into this personality where they're perhaps a Manchurian candidate assassin, or this personality where perhaps they're a sex kitten like Marilyn Monroe and so many others. Yes, this was accomplished in the 30s, and Estabrooks actually approached, from what I've read, the DOD, which was the Department of War back in those days, saying, "Hey, you guys need this stuff." And so here you have,
right. No, so this is a remarkable. Sorry to interrupt, but this is a remarkable historical document that I haven't seen in other places, but it was downloaded by John Greenwald. I think he operates Memory Vault or Mind Vault, Black Vault, I think is what the website is, but it's 500 pages. And I just scratched the surface of it, but it is remarkable. You can see the time here, 1938, J. Edgar Hoover, Estabrooks. It's remarkable in its length and complexity and all the people involved. And we know, like, J. Edgar Hoover had a male lover. His name was
Townsend or something like that.
Something like that. But he's involved. So you're seeing this pre-computer, like everybody's supposed to get copies of all of this correspondence, right? And so that's being copied to this. And you just mentioned Colgate, right? So here's this. This is right off of Colgate letterhead. This is all very important stuff. Like the computer age has kind of lost the formality of letterhead and typed memos and memorandum, but it seems like it. But these are very important. You can see the stamps on here. Clyde Tolson was his name. But you can see some of these other names who pop up, but they get check marked and they're reading through all these things. They're really incredible. Talking about hypnosis, purpose of the projects, hypnosis and juvenile delinquency. So it's really interesting too, because it unfolds itself over time, where finally J. Edgar Hoover realized, hey, this can be used for bad things as well. But it's really incredible documents that I think just kind of were released by FOIA within the last 5 years. I think this is from 2017, but that'll be another show for me. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, really
Oh
interesting.
yeah, there's so many rabbit holes you can go down here.
Yeah.
But the thing I think that we need to stress, or I'd like to stress, is that these were the best and the brightest of the science community that were kind of put together through grants from the Rockefeller Foundation, and Macy's conference was itself a front. So you have all these front agencies doing these research projects, many highly unethical projects, 149 with MK Ultra, but that came after Bluebird and Artichoke and Chatter and a whole series of others, and it was followed by a whole series of others. And the bottom line again is they wanted to merge man with machine. They wanted to. They had already discovered how radar. There's no firewall to the brain. So, and of course, we are electrochemical beings. So we can be influenced by the frequencies around us, and we are influenced by it. And of course, now we're in this frequency soup, which is 100,000 times more concentrated in terms of EM frequencies than perhaps our grandparents lived in. Right. But you talked about hypnosis. Well, okay, yeah, you can fragment the personality through imposition of trauma-based mind control, and that gets into satanic ritual abuse, gets into rape of children, because then you traumatize the child's brain between 0 and 6, ideally, I guess, and they have to dissociate, because otherwise they'll just die, because the pain is so much. So they dissociate. Another fragment can be trained up by somebody who knows what's happening. And so this is actually in the satanic rituals, to create these, and this I think is one of the main reasons why the pedophile movement is being pushed so hard, because if you rape children, they're going to be very dissociative, and they're going to be much easier to handle, and they're much more likely to rape children in the future. And of course, the pedophilia and the homosexuality all go together, and the elite want fewer people, So there's a number of reasons why this is being pushed, and they're all bad reasons. Of course, very, very damaging, very, very destructive of a human being and their mind. But this trauma-based mind control, satanic ritual abuse is key to programming a brain. And what they want is a programmable brain, a brain that you can program like a computer. And of course, hypnosis was very effective. They learned by the 50s, certainly before, actually 40s, that electromagnetic frequencies carry information. And so they're able to program minds remotely. We talked about this last time, Dr. Norbert Wiener at MIT, with his autocorrelator machine, sending and receiving EEG patterns, electroencephalograph patterns, the brainwaves, which he could interpret with harmonic analysis. Information is carried on the frequencies. So by the time of the Kennedy assassination, another government CIA project, of course, military, they already had what they called radio hypnotic intracerebral control. Radio hypnotic intracerebral control. So now they could hypnotize from a distance with radio waves, and trigger the Manchurian Candidate to be an assassin or whatever. So
just to interrupt, but if people don't know this, one of the elements of the Sirhan case was his communication with somebody called Radio Man. This is in the documents, in his court documents. So he's on the radio all the time. He was an amateur, radio, how he got started with that. But it explains a lot. And they think that maybe like a lot of his scribblings in his diaries and things like that were due to post-hypnotic suggestion. And he's clearly been messed with. Yeah, sorry.
Well, yeah, it's very it's appropriate you bring this up. And again, there's so many tangents, so many ways to go with this. Okay, so let's bring up the Kennedy and King assassination. Who did that? Of course, the government did. And then immediately, and it was a coup, certainly the 1963 assassination of JFK, and then the assassination of his brother was to keep the, keep
the coup alive. Yeah, keep
him out of the presidency, so that the Bush faction and others, could the more fascist faction could have their day, and of course RFK would have tried to expose this, but so this comes out in the Minds of Men movie. Lyndon Baines Johnson, who certainly would have been apprised of the plot, and of course covered it up, is saying, okay, what happened right after 1963? The cities of America were on fire. We had all these black riots. Now, I'm old enough to remember that. The 60s was a very, very, very chaotic, dramatic, violent decade. And and of course, a lot of the violence in the ghettos was by blacks protesting extreme oppression, the extreme poverty, and they were treated horribly. And a lot of people think that a lot of these riots were provocateur by the government. 1964's, 1965, 66, 67, 68. I mean,
right, Malcolm X was 65 too, right?
Well,
I think that was an FBI operation, yeah.
Right. So basically, the government is killing these black leaders, but, and this is the interesting part, government neuroscientists like Marks, Sweet, and Vernon Marks, Sweet, and one other guy I can't remember. They're writing grants to the government saying, okay, we have a problem. There's violence is out of control, and we think it's endemic to their mental state. In other words, it's in their brain. We think there's a physiological cause for this.
Yeah, Jolly and West wrote about that too. He had a solution for that as well.
Lots and lots of grants, proposals, and now there's tons of grant money to study violence in the brain. And then these psychosurgeries were happening en masse around the country by Mark and Sweet and these guys. They were getting lots of big grants, and what they were doing is they're taking almost guys off the street and turning them into guinea pigs and destroying their lives psychosurgically. They're burning parts of their brain out, and they're experimenting on them, basically using them as guinea pigs. And they've got wires hanging out of their brain. This is going all over the country at hospitals and universities, and for some reason, this is accepted. And as an example, and we're still setting the stage for where we're going today because I want to bring it to the present. But the Dr. Ewan Cameron, again, the friend of John Rawlings Rees over in England, who was from Scotland, he was the head of the World Psychiatric Association, the American Psychiatric Association, and the Canadian Psychiatric Association. Big wheel, he's writing papers, he's giving talks, he's the top mucky muck. Well, okay, so he gets appointed at McGill University at the Raven Crags facility, and he develops his own house of horrors in which and this is shown very well in the Minds of Men, in which he tries to reprogram the brain. And the two-step process, which I couldn't quite get right last time, the first step is depatterning, is the name he gave it. But basically, he would take these patients right off the street for minor complaints. He had a big reputation, and he would put them through weeks of sleep deprivation and electroconvulsive therapy, ECT, overdosing them with acid for weeks, making them stay up, depriving them of senses. In other words, it was torture. He was trying to break them down psychologically so that they could be reprogrammed. And what he wanted to do is create this tabula rasa, a blank slate. And he did. He brought some people like these housewives back to vegetable state this way, and they didn't know who their husbands were. They didn't know how to go to the bathroom. They didn't know who their kids were. They didn't know who they were. And then, of course, the psychic driving is the second part of the twofold process. And in that, again, this Jewish engineer rigged up some football helmets with tapes that gave these looped messages, 24 hours a day or whatever, 18 hours a day. You're awful. Your parents hate you. Kill yourself. To rewire the brain. Okay, now let's go back to what McCullough knew. The neurons that fire together wire together. Okay, so all these potential connections, trillions of potential connections. Eventually, a human personality is determined by how the neurons actually interact with other neurons, which is dependent on your environment. And if you've grown up with the loving parents and, out in nature and stuff like that, you're going to, this is a geographer, not a neuroscientist talking. You're going to get a certain configuration of your neural nets, which makes for a very happy personality and a happy person normally. So they wanted to, scramble that and mess it up. And now we're going to give traumatic experiences. We're going to get the neurons to fire differently. We're going to change their environment because they came up in the Macy conferences with the idea, hey, basically it's just the human brain, the sensory system, and the environment. What can we change? We can change the environment. We can change the sensory system if we want to program the brain. And so they're looking at this like a black box mechanistic thing, like the human mind is a computer. And it was to these guys. Very dark. I mean, again, this is, to me, this is very demonic. The human being is not a computer. It's again, made in the image of God. They reduce it to the mechanistic, it's a computer.
Right. And I think that's what Esterbrook wrote is the mechanical mind. He just saw it as a mechanism, right?
Yeah, they all think that way.
Yeah.
And that's how they learn to think, unfortunately. We really should be going into I think still our neuroscience, psychology, psychiatry departments and challenging them about what they're doing. But anyway, so there's Cameron's work, and he wanted a Nobel Prize for this. I mean, this is out of the Chamber of Horrors. This is, he's right up there with Joseph Mengele in the minds of those who know, how evil psychiatry can be when it's combined with the state to control the mind.
Right.
Okay, so that said, if you have something to jump in there, I'd like to try to bring it up to the future.
Yeah, please do. Please continue.
And I think you have an inkling of this as well, as we talked a little bit before. Okay, let's listen to what Noah Yuval Harari, this Jewish professor at Hebrew University, who's the main advisor to Klaus Schwab, who's the head of the World Economic Forum, who is telling us how it's going to be now that we're in the Great Reset, the fourth industrial revolution, the convergence of the biological person and the digital person. Okay, that's the biodigital convergence. That goes right back to Macy's conference when Norbert Wiener said, and this is in the movie, In the Minds of Men, the brain has an analogic component and a digital component. So it's both analog, which is, complete, and then digital, which is zeros and ones, a representation of nature.
Zeros and ones is Turing, right? That's Turing.
Yeah, totally. And computers, and I can just do an aside. When I was in the 7th grade or 8th grade, I can't remember, would have been 1962 or 63. They had just come out with the new math, and it was, base 1, base 2, base 10. And now looking back on it, that's why, because they're, trying to get us to kind of be conversant with this new way of thinking like a computer, But anyway, so Yuval Noah Harari is a history professor, and he's coming up with lines for those who are paying attention. Humans are now hackable animals. Well, duh. That's Delgado was doing that in the 50s, right. And so were all these MK Ultra doctors. And Saul B. Sells in 1959 with Texas Christian University. He's looking for the remote activation of the human test subject. That is to say, with electronic frequencies. And there's 5 components to that study, and including biosensors in the body. So in 1959, they were very, very far along. And now here, Yuval Noah Harari is announcing to a innocent, ignorant world, you're now hackable animals. Well, they've been doing it since the 50s. He says, thus free will, that's over. Well, they've got ways to override your free will now. Now we have under the skin surveillance, he says. We can tell what's going on inside you. And this is where, of course, this merges with AI precision medicine and electroceuticals, where they can send frequencies now. And again, back and forth. They can, and guess what the gateway is to the human wireless body area network?
I
The
don't
gateway
know.
is your
Tell me.
cell phone. Your cell phone.
Right,
Get rid of the
right.
damn cell phone. I mean, that thing, that's a weapon. But anyway, yeah, and they're going to be using it more and more as a weapon, as a gateway to AI precision medicine, to tell, so they can tell whether you've been taking your meds, what the state of your heart is, and all this is data. They want data, see? And they're going to control the world by controlling the data with their supercomputers and their satellites and their electromagnetic frequencies. And so under the skin surveillance then is monitoring your heartbeat and whatnot. And this gets right into Bill Gates' 060606 patent, which is Microsoft, which is body activity to digital currency. So with this under the skin surveillance now, they can allot currency, digital currency, to you, the person, or your digital twin, depending on whether they like what you're doing. If you're a good little slave, and you're producing energy, for them. This is an energy harvesting technology too. I mean, we're way into the future that people don't know about. And so with this under the skin surveillance, which has been going on for a long time and been tested on the targeted individuals, and here we come full circle, we have been the guinea pigs for the development of this system since the 1950s. And of course, that's why the government has to say, well, you're crazy. And they gaslight us and say, well, it's not really happening.
Yeah, no, they've gaslit us about everything forever. I mean, it's incredible, the lies. I mean, when they figure out how bad, like people figure out how bad the government's been involved in domestic politics and assassins, they just be shocked. Like you said, the 60s, like they're involved in so much dark stuff during the 60s. A lot of those assassinations were all government sponsored.
Yes. Well, yeah, and then bring us up to the 80s. And I think you probably know about the serial killers. Well, a lot of people like David McGowan believe this is really the continuation of the Phoenix program in the Vietnam War, where they were, torturing people who were sympathetic with the Viet Cong, and they're just rounding them up and putting them in torture centers, and they killed every one of them. It's like, didn't matter whether they confessed, they just tortured them and then killed them. I mean, this is a brutal regime. I mean, the United States.
There's a lot of people came out of the military to be killers. Shawcross came out. Yeah. Gary Heidnik. I think Jeffrey Dahmer was somewhere in the military in Germany somewhere. I mean, the list is really long. It's unpleasant when you look at it,
Well, it is very unpleasant, but there's what do they say? Knowledge is power, and ignorance is certainly not strength. Yeah. Although I think
the Night Stalker, right? Well, Ramirez, his family member came out of the Phoenix program and showed, like, this is pre-internet, showed like Ramirez, like horrifying pictures from Vietnam, and Ramirez, like that affected Ramirez, like. Yeah, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, it really turned it into hell, And of course, they tested so many of these mind control programs over there. I mean, this is why the military loves to have wars, because they get to test all their new developments, and they did a lot with mind control.
Tons of those in Guantanamo during the quote war on terror. But I did a show, and they were definitely using the same techniques they used from MK Ultra. Their isolation, sensory deprivation, repatterning, the whole bit is really disgusting on often really kind of hapless Middle Eastern men who weren't terrorists.
Well, yeah, there are goat herders from Saudi Arabia who were rounded up, who were just, locals would get paid by the CIA.
Wrong place, wrong time. Yeah.
If they turn them over to, an innocent person. This is my point, that the people that were experimented on for, curing violence in the brain in the 60s by, Sweet and Irvin and Mark and those guys, and the TIs now who are put on the terrorism watch list, these are all innocent people. Right. So the people in Abu Ghraib, the people in Guantanamo, the TIs, the people in the 60s who were, subjected to every horror by these radical neurosurgeons who were going for Nobel Prizes to reprogram the human brain like a computer. I mean, these guys must have a special place in hell.
Yeah.
You know. But anyway, yeah, going back to, I'd like to just pause on that because we work pretty good together. You mentioned Guantanamo. Two Air Force psychiatrists or psychologists were paid $90 million by the CIA to go work on these guys they have in captivity. Complete control over these guys. It's like going to be what the smart city and the cognitive cities are like, only maybe worse even. But what these guys did is they pulled out the MK Ultra work of a guy named Martin Seligman, who in 1967 was working on learned helplessness. And he, back in 1967, again, using these frequencies, he would take dogs or rats or both dogs and rats, and he would, watch them, put them under whatever, their space. And as the dog tries to go over this way, he'd zap them and, pain. And I can't go that way. And then the dog tries to go that way. He zaps him with pain again. He comes back, can't go that way. And then he tries to go over here. Every single avenue that he tries, he's thwarted with these painful shocks. And eventually the dog or the rat, they just sit down and they just give up. They die. Their will is broken. Well, this is exactly what they're doing to human beings in Guantanamo Bay. By recycling Martin Seligman's work on learned helplessness, which is what these two demons, I'd say, from the Air Force psychology branch, did over there in Guantanamo. They're doing the same thing. They're trying to break the will of these people. And I've heard stories that once the people gave up, they let them go. They said, "Well, we broke their will." We won. And this is a kind of a military mindset that apparently kind of rules the roost. And in fact, again, there's so many tangents, but one of the advocate groups for targeted individuals is Targeted Justice, and they've just come out with a little report called targetedjustice.com, by the way, which is talking about 4 common myths for TIs. And I think it's worth reading what they say to TIs. I think they're supposed to be advocating for us, but here's what they say. They get a lot of information. They're always giving out questionnaires to TIs. And they've got this lawsuit now with Anna Toledo, the Puerto Rican TI, against the Justice Department and the FBI, et cetera. And here's what the message to TIs from Targeted Justice, January 2024, this year. This is in response to the idea that they say a lot of TIs feel they're the first and they're the worst targeted in history. And then in their document here, they say, you are not the most targeted person in the world. You are an experiment, and your data is important, not you. You are not a member of the National Security Council. You do not have access to the nuclear launch codes. You are not a member of Congress. You are not the first or the worst. You are a valuable and expensive experiment. The government criminals care about their experiment, not you personally. The goal of the program is to get you to surrender or neutralize yourself. If you kill yourself, then you have also neutralized yourself. Talk about a lose-lose, huh? The CIA considers that to be a success story. Do not do it. You are an expensive experiment. If you are dead, then there is no data. I mean,
cold-blooded. Yeah,
that's cold-blooded, and that's coming from a group that says that they're advocating for us. So basically, again, going back to MK Ultra, this British spy Gregory Bateson, 6'8" MI6 and CIA operative and anthropologist, did a lot of work on the double bind. That's the lose-lose. That's the heads you lose, tails you lose. The baited mousetrap. And it sounds like what we have here. You can either stay around and get tortured and have a terrible life. That's what TIs get, like the ones in Guantanamo Bay, or you can kill yourself. Take your choice. But the government doesn't give a shit if you do, but or because all they want is your data, and they want to know when you give up.
And I've heard this double bind approach is used in modern media. So modern, like corporate so-called news is double binds where they confuse you. They deliberately switch their conclusions, and so you go right into learned helplessness. So people
Yeah.
think that these studies are done in some kind of sterile academic ivory tower environment. They're applied to you. They are applied the double bind and learned helplessness. And there was another debility, dread, and something that like another phrase that they used to use, but they're being applied to the American people. So these weapons that are often supposedly designed against the enemy or the commie threat, the commie threat may just be the average American citizen. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We're the enemy. I mean, the government, the deep state has committed so many crimes, and if it were to be fair and pay restitution to all the non-consensual human experimentees such as TIs, I mean, there wouldn't be enough money in the world, because I think there's been quite a few of us. I think there's millions of us.
Yeah, they only get caught for like 20% of their crimes, something like that. Like there's so many crimes that go on because people knows the justice system is just can drain you and slow, and they know that too.
Right. Yeah. So going back to Yuval Harari, who's telling us what our future is in the fourth industrial revolution, the Great Reset, the smart cities, Agenda 2030, all the same thing. I would call it the Antichrist kingdom. He says, we are in the process of becoming gods. Now, of course, that would be the ones who get digital immortality. That would be the ruling elite. He says, using our divine powers of creation, we're in charge of evolution now. After 4.5 billion years of organic evolution, the way God did it, if you're Christian, spiritual, the way nature did it, if you're, just want to be kind of scientific about it and look at natural selection and mutation as a process. After 4.5 billion years of carbon-based organic evolution, which I want to get rid of the carbon now, we are entering a new era of inorganic life. Let's have a silicon universe. That's how we're going to reimagine creation for Satan. Inorganic life shaped by intelligent design, our intelligent design. So this little demon, Yuval Noah Harari, the homosexual Jew, who is Klaus Schwab's right-hand thinker, who's written 2 books. One's called Homo Deus. Of course, Homo be the genus, species now Deus, God, man. And he's now claiming that he and his tribe are the God men. And then the rest, of course, are going to be the cyborg slaves, the ones they decide to keep around. And in the meanwhile, he says that in the 21st century, bodies and minds are the main products. Bodies and minds are the main products that they sell to each other. So actually, the TI program is a form of human trafficking because it's like sex trafficking. You can sell a sex trafficked child or a woman many times and make money each time. Like with a TI who's on that FBI terrorist blacklist or whatever, you can traffic them out to this corporation or this medical facility. Over a period of time, they can have many overseers and handlers and make a lot of money. So people are making money at all scale. And of course, the TIs are, going through hell, but we don't factor that into the equation. And then again, all this is coming out of the Macy conferences and MK Ultra, these technologies that allow them to now make these cyborg robots, to have this fusion of man and machine, which now very, very far advanced.
Yeah, I mean, we have. You want to talk to the president? You've got this guy, Harari. You've got Musk with the Neuralink, and he kind of, presents it as a one way from your brain to something else. I think we talked about that in one of our former conversations. But what about them going into your brain? Like that might be something in the very small, the small print in their warning, release or whatever in their materials. Like it could be even super dangerous. I mean, especially with the technology that they've learned over time, right? They know how to use frequencies. I know people personally who cannot live near cell towers. They cannot do it. They just cannot function. So like these frequencies, and I know the cell industry pretty well. they have to shut down a cell tower to fix it. Like it has so much radiation. Like you literally will go, if you're a male, you'll go sterile if you're close to those towers for too long. So
Yeah,
it's
clearly they don't have a very high regard for the human beings that they're supposed to be serving and protecting and representing. I mean, the whole idea of a representative democracy built into our a republic built into our constitution. This elite doesn't give a damn about that. Obviously, they want to scrap that.
there's too much money involved. The cell industry is, hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah, and the telecommunications industry is very central to all of this.
Yeah.
And that's what Ronnie Kilda knew. Remember, we talked about her last time, Dr. Ronnie Kilda, the chief medical officer of Finland, northern Finland, many medical degrees, knew 6 languages, and she wrote the book Bright Light on Black Shadows. She herself was targeted and tortured from 1985 to her death in 2015, which was probably, related to that targeting. But her book is really a good resource for those who are targeted. And let me just read the quote that I got from her here. From my point of view, she says, and this is, again, this lady understood the system in the year 2000, 2001 better than, 99.9% of humanity does now. From my point of view, the uses of this new technology philosophically, and the new technology is satellites, supercomputers, electromagnetic frequencies from cell towers, satellites, mobile devices, and probably those radomes, which are all over the place, like HARP and whatnot. The uses of this new technology philosophically are more technical, brain-to-computer interface, brain-to-brain interface, all of these things, interpreting EEGs, transcranial magnetic stimulation. They have a whole series of ways to quote-unquote non-invasively measure the activity in the brain, even to the point of reading thoughts. So the uses of this new technology philosophically are comparable to and amount to the biblical fall of man, the eviction from paradise, the all-encompassing thought reading and mind-influencing capacity. Yes, they can broadcast signals that affect whole regions from these cell towers and subliminal thinking, subliminal emotions that people wouldn't be able to identify. The mind-influencing capacity of this technology divides man into 2 encampments. Those few godlike people who are allowed to use these means, and all others whose freedom and free will is being taken away. So Noah Yuval Harari, his tribe says we're becoming gods. Screw you. We're going to have everything, and you're going to be our slave if we let you live. So I personally object to that. That's why I'm trying to learn this stuff and teach others. But if my thesis here, William, is that the Great Reset, UN Agenda 2030, the Go Direct to Digital Currency, the CBDC program, which is really the mark of the beast, AI Precision Healthcare, the TI program, Gitmo and Abu Ghraib, and modern cognitive warfare, all of these are directly related to MK Ultra and the Macy conferences and have their origin in these mind control experiments, which were top secret, and many are still classified. And so our modern world then is the result of these top secret programs that are now, at least now, we have a sense of what they did. As you said, in 1953, CIA Director Alan Dulles called for brain warfare. Well, okay, that's 1953. Now we have cognitive warfare. It's quite a continuum. And in the meanwhile, they've experimented on and destroyed the lives of countless people. Prisoners, soldiers, babies, from all segments of society. So we have a very brutal, unbelievably brutal governing elite when you get down to it under the system. And most Americans, if they were to know half this stuff, they would have to change the way they operate, I think, or else they just give up,
They'd be terrified to know how many of the things they use, the technologies, the social media, the ideas, the psychology they've been given have come out of these mind control, behavioral modification, psychological programs. They'd be terrified. It would be like a coming out of a cult, like if they realized that how deep it was. I mean, all that stuff, a lot of InQtel, a lot of the modern technology, it's all CIA financed, and they've all known all this stuff. It's all centralized intelligence, right? Secret, top
Yeah,
secret
and when you
ops. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, going back to Gregory Bateson, the guy who did so much work on the double bind, he also spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to mimic the symptoms of schizophrenia.
Right.
And of course,
Schismogenesis, right?
if
Yeah.
so if they can get the targeted individual to go to the doctor, the psychologist, and say, hey, hundreds of people are following me, and I'm hearing voices in my head. Well, then the psychiatrist, and they really are being followed by hundreds of people, because that's the gang stalking program. And they really are hearing voices in their head, because they've had voice to skull, synthetic telepathy, microwave hearing, and many names for it, since the 40s and 50s. Certainly the 50s, by 52, the electrical stimulation of the brain, et cetera. But the psychiatrists and psychologists are going by the CIA derived DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which says that if a patient comes to you and says, "Oh, I'm hearing voices," or "I'm being followed by hundreds of people," well, they must be schizophrenic. Well, this, of course, is a big lie, because people don't develop schizophrenia at the age of 40. But nonetheless, this gives the doctor the framework then to go ahead and just institutionalize this person. Put him on meds and institution, which of course is the goal of the program. The goal of the program is to neutralize the individual, to get them institutionalized in a psychiatric ward or in a jail, or to kill themselves. And so again, this is the really dark side of America that so many of the people that I know, they don't want to admit that it's real, but it's huge and it's growing. Gang stalking is a very, very lucrative and expanding business, carried out by many agencies that are cutouts for federal agencies, and they're working in these public-private partnerships and these non-governmental organizations. I mean, look at what's going on now with the sex trafficking at the border with these poor immigrant kids.
That's industrial sex trafficking. Yeah.
And well, this is the same evil. Is raw evil that is being inflicted on targeted individuals by the society, and it's happening like in plain sight, and people who protested are likely, to be targeted themselves. So it would seem that this evil force has taken bigger and bigger control over our nation, which I think, is special in many ways. The Constitution made it very special. The real estate itself is, magnificent. The cultures that came here, I think, are the product of thousands of years of development, and the Christian tradition, I think, is kind of the thing that kind of makes it work. The moral system in the Christian tradition. That's what the founding fathers said. If this system's not going to work if people aren't moral.
Right.
But little by little, with the Frankfurt School and these, invasions of European Jews, et cetera, who wanted to impose cultural Marxism, et cetera, and make America so rotten it stinks. This was the attitude of these Frankfurt School guys, back in the 20s and 30s. They were going to culturally destroy the country instead of militarily destroy the country. So this is what has happened, and these profit-making schemes then pull more and more people into systems which are like the sex trafficking of immigrants, which now apparently includes also the sex trafficking of American kids, who are going through the foster care system. I mean, it's just making and of course the LGBTQ thing, and I mean the culture, the standards of the culture have degenerated to such an extent that it's possible that
it could collapse. It's not even degraded. We're headed towards cultural collapse, where people are just going to be like, "This is complete nonsense. I'm not going on with this. I'm not putting up with this." And it's a lot of that stuff. Learned helplessness. Like, you just back up. Fine. You're a woman. I know you're a man in a dress, but if you're a woman, they just give up. They won't even fight against these lies, and then they compound themselves. That's really what happens.
Right. They're neutralized, So again, going back to Tavistock, going back to MK Ultra at the beginning of 1953 when Dulles signed it into, there always was a two-track, and that is to target specific individuals and try all that stuff on them, to use them as guinea pigs, and then take what they learned on the experimental projects of the specific individuals and apply it to the culture en masse. So again, coming out of the British psychological warfare division in World War One, John Rawlings Rees, Sir, Lord, Doctor, lots of other titles. But apparently, he revolutionized the profession of psychiatry and weaponized it to an extent. And now we're in a system where just about everything is weaponized. Cognitive warfare is sometimes called the battle for your brain or the war against truth. And it claims that it can change people from the inside out. Okay, now there's the electromagnetic frequencies. And it claims that everybody can become a weapon now. Your friend, your mother, your family, all can become weapons against you so that you effectively then have no support. Again, going back to Macy's, okay, there's the human, there's the senses, there's the environment. We can manipulate the senses. We can manipulate especially the environment. We can change the environment so that all the interactions are negative, so that essentially the individual can't get a bank account, can't get service at an auto dealer because they're, the DHS has given lists of these quote unquote terrorist threats to all these 1,400 businesses and 18,000 agencies, and they're on the blacklist. So, you go into a store, and I'm a TI and I know, even in Mexico, I think what happens, I go in, there's the guy behind the counter or the girl, and there's the computer screen. Well, okay, we're all connected now, right, with a computer screen. So probably there's a little flag that comes up in the corner saying, watch out for this guy. He's a potential terrorist threat or whatever.
Right.
And yeah. So you go, you want some work done on your truck or you want some work done. I mean, I go to the Ford place here in La Paz, Baja California, and they charge me, 10 times more than they should for parts, And so I learned pretty quick not to go there, but obviously I'm on the list there, And so I have to,
Sheila's asking a question. How can an individual protect themselves against direct electronic interference?
Okay, so what you're talking about is countermeasures. These are weapons. These are military grade weapons. The frequencies that the CIA and the military, they talk about full spectrum dominance of the world, of humans. That's the mastering the human domain under Jade Helm, but also that's the electromagnetic domain. I mean, these guys are crazy. They want to control everything. It's kind of like the devil in the Bible. I will, I will, I will. So what do we do? I'll tell you what I do. There's a guy named Dave Case, who is kind of a self-taught electrical engineer from back east. And he was approached to work on some of these projects, apparently. And he saw what was happening. And a lot of this is stimulus response. They want to measure your response, to being shocked or to being, threatened or to being, frightened or whatever, but a lot of it is based apparently on galvanic transfer of energy along your skin. So what he has done is he made a little CD, which he gives out for free, which, combines different soundtracks of technical stuff. And then he recommends a certain kind of earphones, earphones, I think, that actually vibrate your skin slightly, just enough to mess up their signal. Because these signals are amplified many, many times so they can make sense of them. But a little bit of perturbation of, say, your skin with these earphones listening to this CD evidently messes up their system. And then, of course, he gives you a certain kind of CD player that, they both cost about $20. And so I get the CD player and the CD and the microphones, and that's how I sleep. Sometimes I do it in the day. But you're very, very susceptible at night. There's no firewall on the mind. So, and they know where you are with total surveillance. So they can inject dreams, they can inject voices, they can do all kinds of things to you. And if, like I said last week, if you're a woman, they can rape you. Again, with the sensations they produce electromagnetically. So I find that the David Case CD works for me. Others talk about a different kind of bone. What do you call it? Bone induction thing, where you have a headphone which is connected to your bone.
I don't know. Voice.
Other people, it's on the market. $50, $60, $70. That doesn't. I'm hearing from TIs that doesn't work so well, and I'm hearing from others that it does work. So experiment with that. I think the whole business of Faraday cages, they can get around that pretty easy. I think these guys are very, very sophisticated. This is military grade weaponry. I think they know what the countermeasures are.
Probably.
But we're experimenting.
Stop using what they're using. Yeah, they know a lot. They know a
lot because they drill everything, they experiment on everything, and we're the guinea pigs. Yeah. And the TIs are the canaries in the coal mine. We're the real guinea pigs. But they don't mind experimenting on everybody like they're doing with the COVID shot now.
I don't think that's experimental at all. I think they knew everything was in there.
That could be.
Came out of DARPA. I think they tell people, "Hey, it's experimental." I think the experiments were already done. Dawn asks, if brain waves from basic thought, feeling, and emotion can supposedly be recorded, are they able to record intuitive moments of wisdom, if not written or spoken?
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so, this technology allows certain individuals to peer into the mind of the person to steal their ideas. If they're an inventor, and there's a case in Kansas, Wichita, Kansas. A guy, an inventor by the name of Walbert, sued a Jewish guy who had this technology as a private guy and was stealing his invention ideas. And he brought that to the court in 2 cases, and he won. And there's very few legal cases where TIs win. But this case, I've got it on my gangstalkingmindcontrolcults.com website, which now has 2,350 posts. Yes, they can take ideas. They can take creative ideas if they want to steal. If you're a songwriter, and you're writing a song. I mean, if you're a TI, they got surveillance in your house. They've got you 24/7 deep surveillance or uberveillance, and so they just take that. And this has been the case for decades. So yeah, I mean, this technology is very, very scary, and we need to talk it up. We need to educate ourselves, educate each other. We need to hold the people accountable who are using it against us. My website is, like I say, very, very big now, but there's many others, and there's many, many books and I can send you my list of references, William, on this topic. I mean, I've read these books, and I've many of them, some of them, just about all of them that I've read, and you pick up something here and there. But this is a very complex program and very destructive. I think many, many people have had their lives destroyed and have killed themselves. And the government, a couple of years ago, William, the government, the newspaper story said, we just discovered a new secret agency in the government. Gosh, there's 60,000 spies in this called Signature Reduction Force. 60,000 strong. We just discovered it. And that sounds like mafia hit, doesn't it? We're going to reduce your signature. We're going to wipe you off the face of the earth. We're going to erase you.
DHS itself, DHS has 260,000 employees. That's
260,000 for DHS. This is well, and so does the NASA or NSA has 60,000 spies in plain clothes in America. Wow. CIA, about 30,000, I think. But this is 60,000 ex-special forces people usually, or ex-spies or ex-military. In other words, highly trained people. And then you have the legions of special forces and military people who are freelancing now for corporations who are doing this. And there was a young man named MC McGrath, one of these young, brilliant computer guys who figured out a way to scrape, that's, I guess, a euphemistic term, the curriculum vitae, the CVs of warriors, retired military, special ops people, whatever, who are putting out their vitas so that people will hire them to do what they were trained to do. And they will do things like, yeah, I was trained in honey pots. You know, I can teach people how to do honey traps. I can teach people how to break into homes. I can teach people how to break into cars. I can do this. I can do that. All this, you know, stuff trained by the U.S. government. Now they're out there on the free market. MC McGrath had 100,000 of these resumes, and I've got a lot of them on my website. You can find out who these people are. These are our stalkers. These are the people that are killing us. These are our fellow Americans. And 100,000 of these people, and it was his website was called IC Watch, IC standing for Intelligence Community. So our government and our military has been weaponized against the American people. Yo-yo, you're on your own. You know, you need to know what's going on. They're not your friend. You know, the government believes there's too many people, and their policy is depopulation.
Right.
And it's not true. There's not too many people. We don't need to depopulate. That's another lie I taught.
It's a myth. Yeah, it's going to contract. The population that's going to contract, and all the nations that you see now are going to all have to readjust because the decline is going to be incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, this year, according to the London Times or whatever Daily Telegraph, was the first year that the population has actually decreased in the world since the bubonic plague in the 1300s.
The Black Plague, yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. But this is all deliberate. I mean, this is the governments of the world agreeing, okay, we're going to slam on the brakes, we're going to deindustrialize, we're going to reduce the population because there's too many people, and there's not too many people. These guys are killers. They're liars. They're thieves. They want what we got, and so they want to wage
less competition, right? Less competition.
Yeah, less competition for the elite, you know. Right. And well, let me read
read what you got. I got to wrap it up. I got to run out actually.
Well, the what I was going to read is gets a little bit sensitive, but this is coming from. Did you know Dr. Lorraine Day?
Sounds familiar.
A very, very brilliant and very successful woman. She was a doctor, head of the medical school at University of San Francisco, and also a very beautiful lady who has written a lot of books. And she has a little sentence here. I don't know if even I should read it because there's just too much truth here. But let's see if I can find it. Okay, she's got an article about UN Agenda 21, confiscation of private property, sustainable development, and rewilding. It's called The Plan, UN Agenda 21, confiscation of private property, sustainable development, and rewilding by Lorraine Day, MD. In simple direct terms, the real goal of Agenda 21, now Agenda 2030, is for the elitist Jews to take control of the whole world, including all the wealth of everyone in the world, including control of all the resources in every country in the world, and kill off 5.5 billion people. All Gentiles, of course, non-Jews, and just keep enough people around to be their slaves. The deliberate lie of the story of saving the environment, which is actually being destroyed by these same elitist Jews, not the population of the world, is nothing but a cover story to keep the people in the dark while the plan proceeds at breakneck speed. After all, if people caught on to the truth of what is going on, they might make some attempt to survive. No, we can't have that. We have to keep everybody in the dark. This is nothing less than blatant, raw communism. And we, the people, are paying for it. Cities, towns, and states are being seduced into destroying their own rights and rights of their fellow Americans by federal grants and easy money to implement these diabolical plans. So these retired special forces guys pick up some money from Boeing or Lockheed or whatever, and they stalk their fellow Americans because, hey, every man for himself, right?
Right. Where can people find your stuff? It's gang stalking, mind control, and cults.com, right? And I got those 5 websites too. I can put those in the show notes.
Yeah, I've got the 5 websites: gang stalking, mind control, cults.com. Now with over 2,000 posts. I think it's probably the biggest website on this topic, but there's lots of other good sources. And 911nwo.com is another one. I've been tracking the whole 9/11 thing. It's all very part of this, part of the war on terror. And another one is naturalclimatechange.com, or excuse me, .org, naturalclimatechange.org. That was my field in physical geography. So I've always known that this business about we are destroying the environment, by burning fossil fuels is a huge lie, but it all feeds into Agenda 2030,
right? It's totally
climate change, et cetera, like COVID. These are great signs.
Carbon cycle is a real thing, just like the oxygen carbon dioxide cycle. It's a total joke. It's just
it is, and we are all carbon-based creatures, so the greenhouse effect is good. Carbon dioxide is good. It's a miracle gas.
It wasn't a nicer jungle. That's all it is, right? Who cares?
We wouldn't have plants if it wasn't for carbon dioxide.
It's so crazy. It's totally they're just mind controlling people. These poor kids have to
down while they're lying to us, But then
I gotta run, Eric. We'll still have to do that Operation Phoenix Vietnam show, but
yeah,
I gotta
sounds great.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.